Did you see what's going on? Obviously, you've seen what's going on in California. But the governor gave this creepy fucking speech where he was talking about speculators coming in and talking about what to do with the land of all these homes that have been burnt down while it's still only 6% contained. And he did this little dance like, I've been talking with these, with the governor of Hawaii about what to do. We got some ideas. A speculator. We're gonna have some meetings. Like,
really?
Oh,
California Governor Gavin Newsom is now calling his city's homeless encampments unacceptable, which is odd since he's the guy who, made them acceptable, turning sidewalks into red carpet events for drug addicts, thieves, and unemployed CNN anchors. On Monday, he urged cities to ban the camps from sidewalks, parks, and other public areas. So after years of denying the problem, he's now pretending to fix it, which is like putting on a condom as you're leaving a whorehouse. Who hasn't?
nobody wants President Newsom either. Nobody believes in that guy. That guy's a fucking con man. Everything he did in California, from trying to mandate vaccines for kids to being caught public without a mask and lying about the fact that he was outdoors.
Yeah.
Nobody believes in that guy. He's just a politician. Just a stone-cold, narrative-driven politician. Nobody thinks he's a real human. Whether you like Trump or not, whether you think he's corrupt or not, that's a human being. You know what that guy is. Same thing with RFK Jr. Whether you believe that he's correct about vaccines or whether you believe his policies would be effective, and you know that's a human being. With Newsom, you've got like this construct, this cardboard cutout of a person. I don't think people want that, but they might want it more than they want President Trump.
It started while smoke was still rising. Families in California had just watched their homes turn to a everything gone. Wedding rings, baby photos, entire childhoods. And right there, in front of the charred remains, stood Governor Gavin Newsom. Perfect suit, polished smile, and somehow, he was talking about land use and real estate speculation. He smiled. He did this weird little shoulder wiggle like he was excited, as if the loss and pain behind him were just background noise to some flashy redevelopment pitch.
Gavin ponders why Dems lost.
We lost. We lost the popular vote, and we lost the electoral vote. We got crushed. But
Kennedy, I think the answer is yes, 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 yes.
Was it because of Israel? Yes. Interest rates? Yes. Too woke? Yes. It's like every bad policy that trickled up to the White House during the Biden administration started in California. That state is responsible for the worst politicians in modern history. And he is at the top of the list, and there are some ignoramuses on that list.
People were still waiting for fire containment, only 6% at the time, and he's already talking about plans. Not relief, not accountability, plans for the land. And you could see at the disconnect. It wasn't just tone deaf, it was like watching a man campaign over a graveyard.
Their houses have been burned, all their childhood memorabilia, all the stuff for their kids, the photos, the fucking everything they have is gone. All heirlooms, their mother's wedding ring, that kind of shit. Everything's burnt to the ground. And this guy's like standing in front of all this stuff, and he's got a smile on his face, and he's talking about land use.
The development plans.
Watch this.
Now, it's one thing to mess up a press conference, but this wasn't just a misstep. It felt like the mask slipped. He wasn't there for the victims. He was there for the optics, for the cameras, for the political chessboard. And that's where everything started to unravel. By the way, before we continued, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us grow and share more intriguing stories. Now let's continue.
And he's the guy who thinks he's going to run for president when, so much of the state is absolutely unlivable. And so every project that he's championed, he's now trying to demonize conveniently, and people are not that dumb. Like, people have been through it in his state. They are sick of him. They want him to leave. And maybe that's why so many people around him are like, you should totally run for president. So he gets out of the state.
Yes. Move away. Tyrus, did he leave out anything?
Then came the switch, the sudden pivot, like no one would remember the past few years. Gavin Newsom, the same guy who had practically rolled out the red carpet for homeless encampments, suddenly called them unacceptable. This is the man who watched California's sidewalks turn into outdoor drug dens and pretended it was progress. Who let tent cities take over public parks, schools, and even residential streets? Now he's urging cities to ban these camps like he just discovered they exist?
Down in Hawaii, you had some ideas around some land use concerns he has around speculators coming in, buying up properties, and the like. So we're already working with our legal teams to move those things forward, and we'll be presenting those in a matter of days, not just weeks.
With a big smile on his face. Look at the little wiggle he does with his shoulders. Speculator, watch this. Talking to Josh. Look at this. Look at this little wiggle. It's excited about the possibilities of speculators coming in. And he's saying we're move forward. We're going to move forward on that. These people lost their homes. A lot of those people don't even have fire insurance because the fire insurance pulled out of California. I think like 69% of fire insurance pulled out of California because they're like, this is too crazy. Like, you guys aren't doing jack shit to manage this. You're not clearing the brush.
People didn't forget. They saw how the state handed out clean needles, ignored rising crime, and treated addiction like a lifestyle choice instead of a public health emergency. Now, Newsom wants to act tough, like he's finally stepping up. But it's a little like putting a lock on the barn after the horses ran off and burned the place down. And the irony is thick. For years, critics begged for action. They were called heartless, out of touch. And now, when the problem is so big it's impossible to hide, Newsom changes the script. Suddenly, he's the hero, the fixer, the tough guy cracking down.
So, while Californians have lost their homes and they're still suffering from the devastation, what does Gavin Newsom decide to do? Well, now is apparently the perfect time to try and boost his popularity and essentially promote himself. He's launched a podcast. I'll play you the trailer in just a moment, but take notice. Does the trailer that he shared with the world on X, does it even mention the most horrific fire catastrophe that occurred under his leadership, partly as a result of the decisions he was making, like cutting fire prevention? No, this is his chance to talk about his image, insisting that he's no ordinary politician.
But Californians know better. They've lived through the chaos. They've seen businesses close, neighborhoods collapse, and streets become war zones. So this new plan isn't new. It's desperate. And the timing? Way too convenient, especially for someone eyeing a much bigger stage. And that's exactly where Joe Rogan enters the story, not as a pundit, not as some armchair critic, but as someone who lived it. He didn't just talk about the problems in California, he packed up his entire life and left.
Anything? I think there's about 100 other reasons too.
Well, you can't, it's not his words when he speaks.
Yeah.
You have to watch him closely. And some genius decided not to film him any lower than the shoulder.
Yes, did you? Yes.
So what did he do?
You couldn't see the hands.
No, but he sent Morse code.
Yes.
Go back and watch it. Look at the blinking. Blink, look, meet me at the house. Like, he's blinking. He's sending, I'm getting there. Hey, just so you know, I'm not wearing pants.
Left behind a multi-million-dollar setup, the sunshine, the fame, all of it. Why? Because even someone as successful as Joe Rogan couldn't take it anymore. He described it like watching a system implode in real time. Businesses were suffocating under regulations. Crime was rising. Energy blackouts became normal. It stopped feeling like Malibu and started feeling like the beginning of a post-apocalyptic Netflix series. Rogan called it for what it was, a glitch in the Matrix. And instead of sticking around to pretend everything was fine, he slammed the exit button and moved to Texas. But he didn't go quietly. Rogan brought the spotlight with him. His podcast, with more than 100 million listeners, became the loudest megaphone in digital media. He didn't yell, he didn't rage. He calmly laid out what so many Californians were experiencing, but couldn't say out loud without being labeled crazy.
When Gavin Newsom talks about California, he's like, I'm very big on California, very bullish on California. Hey, they're all moving. The only reason why they don't move is because it's too difficult to move. It's too expensive to leave versus all the bullshit with all the permits and all that. It's too expensive. Believe that he's correct about vaccines, or whether you believe his policies would be effective. And that's a human being. With Newsom, you've got like this construct, this cardboard cutout of a person. I don't think people want that, but they might want it more than they want President Trump.
He exposed the double standard, how elites like Newsom were dining maskless at high-end restaurants while the rest of the state was under curfew, eating takeout in the dark. And once Rogan started peeling back the layers, more people began to see what was really going on. The illusion was cracking. But if Rogan lit the fuse, Greg Gutfeld walked in with a flamethrower. Where Rogan was calm and factual, Gutfeld was ruthless and surgical. He didn't just criticize Gavin Newsom, roasted him like a five-star chef with a vendetta. The hair, the teeth, the rehearsed TED Talk cadence, Gutfeld tore through it all. He mocked Newsom's perfectly polished image, comparing him to a cologne ad that somehow got elected governor. And the best part? He didn't even need to raise his voice. Gutfeld's smirk alone was enough to cut through the nonsense. He pointed out how Newsom always struts in like he's closing a fashion show, not leading a state. While real Californians were struggling to afford groceries and gas, Newsom was launching a podcast, a podcast talking about how he's not your average politician. Meanwhile, wildfires were still smoldering and thousands of people were homeless. But Gutfeld wasn't just focused on the ridiculous optics. He hammered deeper. He slammed the media, calling out how legacy news outlets drool over Newsom like he's JFK with a compost bin. While the streets are falling apart, the headlines are still painting him as some progressive savior.
Runs for national office, he acts like a Republican. This is where the left is really pro-trans. Suddenly, they grow balls.
Gutfeld wasn't having it. He didn't sugarcoat anything. He mocked the fake leadership, the recycled talking points, and the fact that Newsom seemed more focused on magazine covers than on actual governance. And the audience? They felt every word. Because unlike Newsom's speeches, this roast was real. And here's where the real gut punch comes in, because beneath all the glam and media polish, people started to realize something. Gavin Newsom doesn't feel real, not in the way a leader should. While guys like Trump or RFK Jr. might be polarizing, love them or hate them, they feel human. You can sense their flaws, their raw edges. But Newsom? He's like a cardboard cutout.
California Governor Gavin Newsom has been facing major calls to resign over his appalling handling of the deadly California wildfires. And just to quickly recap, these were the most destructive wildfires the state has ever seen. More than 16,000 properties were destroyed. The cost of the fires is estimated to be more than $200 billion. And for businesses in LA County, the future is looking grim. It's projected businesses will continue to lose billions of dollars over the next 5 years due to disruption.
A political hologram wearing a 300 haircut and repeating buzzwords like he downloaded his personality off a teleprompter. People don't connect with that. They can't. Because deep down, voters can sniff out when someone's playing a role. And Newsom? He's been performing from the start. On paper, he looks like a dream candidate, young, charismatic, climate-conscious, smooth with the camera. But when it comes to actually governing, he glitches. It's like watching a robot buffer during a press conference. He talks about being bold and forward-thinking, while banning gas stoves and then asking people not to charge their electric cars during peak hours because the grid can't handle it. That's not leadership, that's theater, and people are exhausted. You can see it in every press clip. He walks up to the podium like he's about to drop world-changing ideas, and then delivers a speech so disconnected from reality, it might as well be an audition for a political drama. But this isn't a show. It's people's lives, and they're not buying the act anymore. And that's when things really started to unravel, because the cracks in Newsom's climate crusade couldn't be ignored anymore. His speeches were filled with all the right buzzwords. Carbon neutrality, solar power, sustainability. It sounded great.
You know, when I went there, I had a great relationship with President Xi. We got along very well. And they treated me better than anybody has ever been treated. And I said, this air is good. Do you know they closed every factory 1 week before I got there from within 200 miles?
That's like what Gavin Newsom did when Xi Jinping came to San Francisco.
He cleaned it up.
He cleaned it up. He got rid of all
Isn't
the
that
homeless
terrible
people.
in a way? To think, you know, he cleaned it up and then it became a pigsty.
Well, the dumbest thing is he said when your friends come by, when you have visitors, you clean up your house. Like, how about just keep your fucking house clean?
Can you imagine?
That's the dumbest thing I've ever heard.
I keep bringing up Gavin. Well, other than my respect for his work in American Psycho, he's starting to distance himself from his party's worst ideas. Newsom, a guy who hates fossil fuels but could still bring down the price of gas by wringing out his hair, once proclaimed that his state would be a sanctuary to all who seek it.
Until reality stepped in like a slap to the face. California's energy grid was so fragile, officials had to beg people not to plug in their electric cars between 4 and 9 in the evening. Imagine that. The same government that pushed electric everything suddenly panicking when the sun went down. Go green, they said, but don't use electricity when everyone actually needs it. Then came the bans. Gas stoves? Gone. All while people were literally cooking dinner with flashlights during power outages. It stopped being progressive and started looking like a parody. Newsom's vision of a clean, high-tech utopia turned into a blackout circus, where regular families had to choose between going green and just getting through the week. And Joe Rogan saw it from a mile away. That's why he left. He looked around and said, "This isn't a city anymore, this is a broken experiment." And the saddest part? He was right. Even basic fire insurance started disappearing from California. Providers pulled out. The risk was too high. The state wasn't managing the forests. Fires kept coming, and there was no plan, just more speeches. So while Newsom kept smiling for the cameras, the foundation beneath him was burning, literally and figuratively. But Newsom didn't slow down. While the state was still reeling homes gone, neighborhoods dark, people leaving in waves, she was busy launching a podcast. That's right. Not a relief effort, not an emergency task force, a podcast. And this wasn't just bad timing. It was a complete PR disaster. The trailer dropped on X, looking like a vanity project made for campaign ads. Not a single mention of the fires. Not one word about the families who lost everything. It was all about him, his journey, his image, his ideas. As if California wasn't falling apart behind him. Greg Gutfeld went in hard on that one. He didn't just call it out, ripped it apart. He said Newsom looked like a guy who governs like he's speedrunning SimCity on nightmare mode. Flawless smile, rehearsed lines, but zero grip on reality. And it landed. Because everyone watching felt it. This wasn't leadership. This was branding. Even the way he looked like he stepped out of a Westworld assembly line became part of the joke. Magazine covers showed a glowing, powerful leader. But in real life, tent cities on sidewalks, crime spikes, small businesses shut down for good. California started to feel like a dystopian theme park where the rides were broken, but the brochures still looked pretty. And while people were paying sky-high rent and dodging random blackouts, Gavin was on camera acting like everything was under control. That disconnect, that was the moment people stopped listening. And Greg Gutfeld wasn't done. Not even close. He turned his attention to the media, the same media that treated Gavin Newsom like he was the second coming of JFK, just with better skincare and a reusable water bottle. Gutfeld pointed out how legacy outlets gushed over Newsom's leadership while completely ignoring what was happening on the ground. Tent cities multiplying, crime getting worse, gas prices through the roof, and yet somehow, Newsom was still being sold as the future of the Democratic Party. But Gutfeld went deeper than just mocking the coverage. He peeled it back, exposing the ugly truth underneath. Families choosing between paying the electric bill or buying groceries. Parents skipping meals to keep the lights on. Meanwhile, Newsom's press team was still chasing photo ops like nothing was wrong. And then came the biggest joke of all the climate policies. Gutfeld absolutely shredded them. He called it what it was: performance. Not about saving the planet, about saving face. Newsom's climate agenda looked great in a tweet, but on the streets? It hit working families the hardest. Surprise fines, rolling blackouts, charging stations that didn't even work. Meanwhile, government officials cruised around in taxpayer-funded hybrids acting like they were changing the world. It was a show, a very expensive, very scripted show, and Gutfeld made sure everyone knew it, because behind the solar panels and the speeches, real people were suffering. And Newsom? He was too busy rehearsing his next line. And that's when the whispers started getting louder. Gavin, 2028. A presidential run. The man whose state was spiraling into chaos now wanted to run the entire country. Gutfeld couldn't hold back. He compared the idea to trying to franchise a restaurant that just failed its health inspection. Sure, the sign out front looks shiny, but the kitchen's a disaster, the food's inedible, and the Yelp reviews are straight fire emojis. It was comedy, but it stung because it was true. Gutfeld called out the absurdity of it all. If Newsom couldn't manage one state without it descending into crime, blackouts, and mass exodus, how was he supposed to handle 50? California wasn't just broken, it was bleeding. Businesses were packing up, families were running for the state line, And yet Newsom was still striking poses like he was ready for the national spotlight. But the real punch came when people realized maybe his team wants him to run. Not because he's a great leader, but because it would finally get him out of California. That's how far things have fallen. The only escape plan left might be a presidential campaign. And as wild as that sounds, it started to make sense. For the people living in the wreckage of his decisions, Newsom in the White House was a nightmare. But for the people stuck with him in Sacramento, it looked like the fastest way to make him someone else's problem. And just when it felt like the roast couldn't go any deeper, Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld, two completely different forces, collided in the same storyline, aiming straight at Gavin Newsom like heat-seeking missiles. On one side, you had Rogan, calm, controlled. No shouting, no political theater. Just cold, hard truth told with that signature stare that makes people stop and listen. He didn't need to exaggerate. He just laid it all out. People are leaving, businesses are fleeing, homelessness is exploding, and leadership is nowhere to be found. He didn't frame it as debate, he called it what it was: decay. And then there's Gutfeld. Fast, loud, razor sharp. While Rogan delivered the facts like a surgeon with a scalpel, Gutfeld threw punchlines like knives at a dartboard. He mocked everything: the press, the policies, the phony optimism. Together, they were unstoppable. Rogan spoke for the thinkers, the people craving substance. Gutfeld spoke for the skeptics, the ones tired of being gaslit by polished speeches and photo ops. They weren't just criticizing, they were exposing. And they were doing it in stereo. Because whether you listened for the facts or stayed for the laughs, they both led to the same brutal truth: Gavin Newsom's leadership wasn't real leadership. It was illusion wrapped in hair gel and recycled slogans. And when the act started falling apart, it didn't just crumble, it exploded, with Rogan and Gutfeld standing right there, holding the receipts. And this is where everything snapped into focus, because Gavin Newsom, for all his press-ready perfection, wasn't fooling anyone anymore. Rogan didn't need some dramatic monologue to get the point across. He just talked, told his story, said it plain: "I left California for a reason." And that hit harder than any viral soundbite. He laid it out. People weren't just leaving because they didn't like the politics. They were escaping. Escaping the sky-high rent, the wildfires with no fire insurance, the blackout warnings, the crime, the taxes, the endless red tape. It was a mass exodus, what Rogan called the modern-day Oregon Trail, only instead of covered wagons, it was Teslas and moving trucks heading straight to Texas. And what was Newsom doing while all this was happening? Fine dining, literally. He was out at the French Laundry, sipping wine while the rest of the state sat in lockdown, eating microwaved leftovers and watching their savings drain. That dinner wasn't just a scandal, it was a symbol, a line in the sand. It showed exactly who the rules were for and who they weren't. Rogan didn't scream, he didn't dramatize. He just gave people the one thing Newsom couldn't: honesty. And in a world drowning in spin and scripted soundbites, that kind of raw, lived experience was more powerful than any press release. It made people sit up and realize this isn't working. And it hasn't been for a long time. And then came the final blow: Greg Gutfeld, back in the ring, sharper than ever. He didn't just mock Gavin Newsom this time, he absolutely filleted him. He started with the visuals. Newsom's face on glossy magazine covers, the Vanity Fair glow-up, the perfect lighting, the politician jawline so chiseled it could cut granite. But Gutfeld wasn't impressed. Because behind those Hollywood angles was a governor presiding over a state that looked more like a sci-fi dystopia than the so-called California dream. He laid it all: outside walks, turned into obstacle courses of tents and needles, 15 smoothies next to boarded-up shops, and gas prices that looked like someone had typed them in wrong. It wasn't just bad policy, it was absurd. And while Newsom was still out there grinning like he saved the world with a TED Talk and a scented candle, real people were living in chaos. But Gutfeld didn't stop at the streets. He went straight for the climate policies, too. The solar panels, the equity speeches, the carbon neutrality buzzwords, all wrapped in Instagram-ready activism. He called it what it was: aesthetic clout, nothing more. Because while Newsom flexed for the cameras, working families got slapped with surprise fines, suffered random blackouts, and watched officials cruise by in taxpayer-funded hybrids like it was all part of the plan. It was a performance, every bit of it. and Gutfeld ripped the curtain wide open. No special effects, no teleprompter, just the raw truth, and it burned brighter than any California wildfire. And just when it seemed like things couldn't get more ridiculous, the idea of President Gavin Newsom started making rounds. That's when Gutfeld went for the jugular. He laughed, literally. Because how does a guy who can't even run one state without it collapsing into blackouts, budget disasters, and tent cities suddenly think he's qualified to run the entire country? Gutfeld compared it to trying to franchise a restaurant that failed its health inspection. The neon sign is shiny, sure. The branding? Flawless. But inside? The kitchen's on fire, the staff quit, and the Yelp reviews are written in full caps with flame emojis and crying faces. Newsom's national ambitions were treated like prophecy in elite circles. Gavin 2028 whispered in cocktail bars like it was destiny. But Gutfeld wasn't buying it. He saw right through the act. The speeches, the climate crusades, the podcasts, the magazine cover sit was all a distraction from the dumpster fire that was California under his watch. And here's the kicker. Gutfeld said the only people who actually want him to run are Californians, and not because they support him, but because they want him gone. Think about that. The idea isn't, let's promote him, it's, please, someone else take him. That's how bad it got. So, while Newsom polishes his national image like a man getting ready for prom, the state he's leaving behind is falling apart, and no amount of designer suits or hair gel can cover that up anymore. And that's when everything collided. Two completely different voices, one explosive conclusion. Joe Rogan and Greg Gutfeld, coming from opposite ends of the media universe, found themselves locked in on the same target. Not just Newsom as a politician, but Newsom as a performance, a brand. A staged production held together by lighting, slogans, and silence from people too afraid to speak up. Rogan didn't need drama. He delivered his truth like a velvet hammer, smooth, calm, lethal. People are leaving, businesses are fleeing. I left for a reason. That line hit harder than any headline. It wasn't commentary, it was testimony. And when he said it, people felt it. Because they'd lived it too. His quiet honesty echoed louder than any political commercial ever could. And Gutfeld? He brought the heat, mocked Newsom's policies like bad reality TV, compared California's leadership to a crypto workshop run by TikTok influencers in a hotel lobby. It was brutal, sarcastic, and dead on. Because behind the jokes were the facts. Soaring rent, locked up storefronts, overpriced gas, families juggling utility bills and groceries. They didn't just criticize, they exposed. While Newsom smiled for the cameras, these two were tearing down the backdrop and showing everyone what was really behind it: chaos, decay, and a desperate attempt to turn failure into ambition. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel. Also, drop your thoughts in the comments. See you on the next one.